They say don't bite off more than you can chew, and that saying could not be truer than what happened in my neighborhood. A man thought he could play cop, thought he could use fear and a fake badge to control me, but what he didn't realize was that he had stepped into the wrong life at the wrong time, and his choices would lead him down a path he could never escape. It all began like any ordinary morning. The sun was out, kids were riding their bikes on the street, sprinklers sprayed arcs of water over freshly cut lawns, and I was in my driveway washing my truck. It should have been a calm Saturday, one of those days where you sip coffee slowly, feel grateful for the quiet hum of suburban life, and maybe wave to a neighbor or two as they mow their yard. But that sense of peace shattered in an instant when a black SUV rolled into my street and parked right in front of my house. At first, I thought nothing of it. Cars parked here all the time, delivery vans, guests visiting neighbors, even the occasional Uber waiting to pick someone up. But this SUV looked different. It was tinted darker than usual, the kind of tint that says official or at least important. The engine cut off, the door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a uniform, dark and crisp. A badge gleamed against his chest, catching the sunlight. A gun sat holstered at his hip, a radio clipped to his belt. He walked with purpose, his boots thudding against the pavement, and in seconds he was standing at the end of my driveway, looking straight at me. "Sir," he called out, his voice sharp and commanding. "Step away from the vehicle." "You're in violation," I froze. "Violation? What violation?" I looked around, half expecting maybe I'd parked wrong or maybe there had been some misunderstanding. But my truck was in my own driveway. I looked back at him and managed to laugh, thinking maybe this was a prank or some HOA nonsense taken too seriously. "In violation of what?" I asked, drying my hands on a rag. His expression didn't change. "HOA compliance orders. You've ignored repeated notices. You are under arrest." The words slammed into me like a hammer. Arrest over HOA rules? For a second, I honestly thought I was on some hidden camera show, that maybe a neighbor was pulling a prank. But the man wasn't smiling. He was dead serious. Before I could even react, he reached for his cuffs and stepped closer. "Turn around. Hands behind your back," he barked. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. "You can't be serious. Arrest? For what, not trimming the hedges?" But he wasn't joking. He grabbed my arm, twisted it behind my back, and the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around my wrist. That's when the first wave of fear crashed into me. The grip was too tight, the pressure real. This wasn't some act. This man truly believed he had the right to arrest me. Neighbors began to peek through their blinds. A couple even stepped out onto their porches, whispering to each other. I could feel their eyes burning into me as the man shoved me against the hood of my own truck. "You've been warned multiple times," he said, his voice low but forceful. "Failure to comply with HOA regulations is a violation. We don't take these matters lightly." The words didn't make sense. No HOA had that kind of authority. They could fine you, send letters, even drag you to civil court. But arrest? That was absurd. My pulse hammered in my chest as I tried to process what was happening. "Look," I said, my voice shaking. "You've got the wrong idea. You can't arrest me for this. Who even are you? Show me your credentials." He pulled a badge from his chest and flashed it quickly, too quickly for me to really examine. It looked real, shiny, metallic, with an emblem I didn't recognize. To an untrained eye, it was convincing enough. But something about the way he tucked it back almost instantly, the way his hand covered half of it, set off alarms in my head. I swallowed hard. "You're not a real cop, are you?" That sentence made him stiffen. He shoved me harder against the truck, his mouth close to my ear. "Keep talking like that and you'll regret it. We have authority here. You think you can ignore the rules? Not in my neighborhood. My neighborhood." Those words rang odd. He said it like he owned the place, like his power wasn't just official, it was personal. And then it clicked. The HOA president. Martin. A man who had been on my back for months about the most ridiculous things. The color of my shutters, the exact shade of mulch I used in the flower beds, the type of light I had on my porch. He had written me up more times than I could count. And he had always said, half jokingly but half serious, that rules are rules and rules are enforced. But this wasn't Martin. This was someone else, taller, broader, with a harder edge. Still, in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow Martin was behind this. My chest tightened as panic set in. This wasn't going to stop with a warning. This man was intent on making an example out of me. I could see neighbors raising their phones, recording the scene. To them, it looked like I was being arrested for something serious. The humiliation burned as hot as the fear. But here's the part the man didn't know, the part that would unravel everything. My brother. My brother wasn't just a guy with a 9-to-5 job. He wasn't just someone who could make a few phone calls to help. He was federal. He carried real authority. Authority that went far beyond the reach of some neighborhood bully in a fake uniform. And the moment he heard what was happening, the entire situation would flip upside down. At that time, though, cuffed against my truck with my neighbors watching, I felt powerless. I tried to reason with the man again, but he cut me off, dragging me toward his SUV. My feet stumbled over the pavement as he shoved me into the back seat. The door slammed shut, the lock clicked, and I was trapped. The air inside was stifling, and for a second I thought I might pass out. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think. This couldn't be happening. No one gets arrested for HOA violations. No one, unless this wasn't about the HOA at all. Unless this man had some other reason, some other agenda, and the HOA was just the excuse. But whatever it was, he was about to find out that intimidation has limits, and his charade was nearing its end. Because you can handcuff me, you can shove me into an SUV, but the moment my brother finds out, your entire house of cards collapses still. Sitting there, heart pounding, sweat dripping down my forehead, I couldn't help but wonder, how far was he willing to go before someone stopped him? The SUV's engine started with a low growl, and I felt the vibration under the seat as we pulled away from my driveway. My mind was racing. I could see glimpses of my house through the tinted window, neighbors clustered together, pointing, whispering, recording. To them, I must have looked like a criminal being carted off for something serious. The thought made my stomach turn. The man in the front seat kept his eyes on the road, jaw clenched, both hands tight on the wheel. His radio gave off a static buzz, but I noticed something odd. There was never any reply. He would occasionally reach for it, press the side button, and mumble a few words, but no one ever answered. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly despite my attempt to stay calm. "Detention facility," he said flatly. That phrase alone felt off. Real cops didn't talk like that. They'd say county jail, precinct, or station, not detention facility. The more I listened, the more the cracks started to show. His tone was rehearsed, like he had memorized lines from a script. "You're making a mistake," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "This isn't how it works. You can't arrest someone over HOA rules." He didn't respond right away. His eyes flicked toward me in the rearview mirror, cold and sharp. "Rules are rules. You broke them. Now you face the consequences." It was almost robotic, and that scared me more than anything. He wasn't improvising. He was reciting. Someone had drilled this into him. The SUV slowed as we approached the entrance of the neighborhood. The guard shack stood empty, as it usually did on weekends. He turned left, heading toward the main road, but then, oddly, he pulled over into a small gravel lot just outside the community. The engine idled. He sat still for a long moment, breathing heavily, tapping his fingers against the wheel. Finally, he turned around in his seat to face me. His eyes narrowed. "You've been a problem. Ignoring notices, ignoring the HOA. People like you ruin communities. You think you're above the rules? You think you can do whatever you want?" I stared back, my heart pounding. "You're not a cop. You don't have authority over me." His lips twisted into a thin smile. "Authority is perception. And right now the whole neighborhood thinks you're a criminal. That's all that matters." Those words sent a chill through me. He wasn't trying to enforce laws, he was trying to humiliate me, to break me down in front of everyone I lived around. It wasn't about rules or violations. It was about control. But if he thought he had me cornered, he was wrong. Because there was one card left to play, one person who would unravel his entire act. My brother. I shifted slightly, feeling the cuffs dig into my wrists. "My family knows where I am. My brother knows what's happening." The man froze. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. "Your brother?" "Yes," I said firmly, finding strength in the truth. "He's federal. And when he hears what you're doing, you'll wish you never stepped foot on this street." The SUV went silent, the only sound the hum of the idling engine. He studied me, his expression hardening again, but there was something in his eyes now. Hesitation. Without another word, he shifted the gear into drive and pulled back onto the road. but his grip on the wheel was tighter, and I could see the sweat forming at the base of his neck. As the SUV rolled past familiar landmarks, my mind replayed the events of the morning. The flash of the badge, the too quick motion to hide it again, the radio that never answered. Piece by piece it was becoming clear. This man wasn't law enforcement. He was a fraud, but the question that gnawed at me was, why? Why go to these lengths over HOA rules? What was he really after? We drove in silence for several minutes before he suddenly pulled into another lot, this time behind an abandoned strip mall. The buildings were boarded up, windows shattered, weeds poking through cracks in the asphalt. The SUV came to a halt and he turned off the engine. My pulse spiked. Why here? What was he planning? He turned in his seat again, staring at me intently. You have a choice. You can fight this, make things worse for yourself, or you can comply. Fix your violations. Stop pushing back. Stop questioning authority. If you do that, this ends here. I stared at him in disbelief. So this isn't about the law at all. This is about you, about the HOA. You're using a fake badge to scare me into compliance. His eyes darkened and his jaw tightened. Call it what you want. I call it order. I felt anger rising in my chest. Fear had kept me quiet up until now. But the absurdity of it all was breaking through. He was just a man in a costume hiding behind props and intimidation. You're pathetic, I spat. A real cop would laugh you out of the precinct. My brother, he's going to bury you. His face twisted in rage, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. Instead, he grabbed the radio and pressed the button again, muttering something incoherent. The static crackled, but as usual, no one answered. He slammed it back onto his belt with a curse. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only when my phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart leapt. Of course, he hadn't taken my phone. Maybe he hadn't thought to check. Maybe he didn't care. Either way, it was my lifeline. He noticed the vibration immediately. His hand shot out, yanking the phone from my pocket. He glanced at the screen. My brother's name lit up across the display. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw real fear flicker across his expression. He ended the call and shoved the phone into his own pocket. No one's coming for you, he growled. But his tone lacked conviction, because we both knew that wasn't true. My brother wasn't the type to let a call go unanswered. And if he suspected something was wrong, he would dig until he found me. He had resources, connections, the kind of reach this man couldn't begin to imagine. The SUV started again, this time heading back toward the neighborhood. My thoughts spun wildly. Was he returning me to make some sort of public scene? Was he planning to stage an arrest in front of the HOA board to scare others into submission? The streets looked different now as we re-entered the neighborhood. Every familiar house felt hostile, every lawn a reminder of how far this had gone. I saw curtains twitch, blinds shift, faces disappear as we drove by. Word was spreading fast. Finally, he pulled back into my driveway, the very spot where this had begun. He yanked open the back door, dragged me out roughly, and shoved me toward my porch. Neighbors had gathered across the street now, whispering among themselves, their phones still raised. He turned to face them, raising his voice. Non-compliance has consequences, he declared, his words sharp, rehearsed, theatrical. Let this be a warning. Humiliation burned hot in my chest, but beneath it a strange calm settled. Because while he was busy putting on a show for the neighbors, I knew my brother was already in motion. Somewhere out there, wheels were turning, calls were being made, and soon, this man would regret every second of this performance. The crowd across the street was growing larger by the minute, whispers turning into murmurs, murmurs into nervous chatter. I could see the curiosity, the fear, the confusion in their eyes. To them, it must have looked like a spectacle, a neighbor dragged out and humiliated by someone who seemed to wear authority like a second skin. And the man, still gripping my arm tightly, seemed to thrive on it. He stood taller, his voice louder, his posture stiffer as though he was feeding on their silence. He leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. Do you see? They believe me. They believe I'm the law. That's all that matters. But even as he said it, his grip betrayed him. It wasn't as firm as before, and I could feel the tension in his hand, the subtle tremor of someone who knew he was losing control. He might have fooled the neighbors, but he hadn't fooled me, and he wouldn't fool my brother, because my brother was already moving. I didn't know exactly where he was, but I knew him well enough to trust he was tracking me down. He had a way of piecing things together quickly, a way of cutting through confusion and landing right at the center of the problem. And if his name had lit up my phone, it meant he was already on alert. The man pushed me forward, forcing me to stand against my porch as he raised his voice again for the crowd. This is what happens when you ignore the rules. Don't test the system. Don't think you're above order. The words felt hollow now, like the desperate act of someone trying to convince not just the neighbors, but himself. My wrists ached against the cuffs, the steel biting into my skin. I clenched my fists, breathing slow, steady, reminding myself to endure. Because I knew what was coming. And then I heard it. The distant hum of engines growing louder, sharper, closer. My heart leapt. This wasn't a neighbor's car. This wasn't another SUV. This was different. The man stiffened, glancing up the street, his bravado faltering. 2 unmarked federal vehicles rolled into the cul-de-sac, dark-tinted windows, engines humming with authority that needed no introduction. They stopped abruptly, doors opening in unison, and out stepped men in plain clothes but with badges that gleamed under the sun. Real badges that bore the weight of true power. My brother was at the front, his stride purposeful, his face carved with determination. The neighbors fell silent. Phones lowered, whispers died. Everyone felt it, the shift in the air, the presence of something real, something undeniable. My brother's voice cut through the quiet, firm and commanding. Step away from him. Right now. The man beside me tensed, his hand hovering near the holster at his side. His eyes darted between my brother and the agents flanking him. For the first time, his mask cracked. I could see the fear, the panic clawing at the edges of his composure. You don't understand, he stammered, his voice no longer booming but shaky. I have authority here. I'm in charge. These people, these rules, they need enforcement. My brother took another step forward, his badge raised high. You're impersonating an officer. Put your weapon down. Put it down now. The man's chest heaved, sweat glistening on his forehead. His hand twitched near the gun, but he hesitated. The silence stretched thick and heavy. Every neighbor holding their breath, waiting to see which way it would go. Finally, with a trembling exhale, he pulled his hand back slowly, lifting it away from the holster. But the fight wasn't over yet. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape, for some shred of